Yeah, but Scott, the point also still stands, and what I asked Secretary Clinton about is there are voters who are worried about how to pay for groceries. We heard from Pam Thistle last night. I was obsessed with her at the town hall as she was talking about her experience and what she's weighing. And it's not always, whether or not Donald Trump's going to use the DOJ as his own personal, weapon. She's worried about what it looks like when she's filing her taxes in April.
Yeah, and I would just, this retribution conversation, was to remind you all that Joe Biden, the current president of the United States, campaigning in New Hampshire this week, literally said out loud, we got to lock him up.
And then corrected himself immediately.
He said, the president has to be a little more precise, with all due respect. We got to lock him up. So all this conversation, it was Biden this week who made the most news on the retribution front.
So Biden won, Donald Trump 6,982
votes. And to clarify, to say politically.
I would add, too, that he did say today that...
That's a strong defense of Donald Trump.
Let me finish. So everybody rushes to Biden's defense on this. It was
Nobody's
a bad
defense. I think it was a stupid thing to say.
It was a bad moment. It was a bad gaffe.
But to your point, there is a reason that 2/3, roughly, of the American people, according to some polling, think we're off on the wrong track. And it largely is what David said. Inflation, cost of food, cost of housing, all of the day-to-day concerns. And so when I hear Hillary Clinton, sort of dismissing, people who want to vote for Donald Trump and not really even mentioning some of the day-to-day concerns of people, it reminds me of why she was so unpopular, why she lost, and why Democrats are struggling to get over the hump in this election.
Well, to be fair, she could have easily won. I think it was 75,000 votes that decided that when you look at that.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Scott, obviously, but we've seen democracy resonate as well in the numbers. We're looking at some other numbers that are coming in.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We have to continue our coverage of the Democrats and their strategists and the mainstream liberal media thinking that it is a good idea to go into the last couple weeks of the election with the closing argument that Trump is Hitler. Trump is a Nazi. Trump is a fascist. This is what they're doing, okay? They're going full-blown Trump derangement. And this is what I told you guys a couple weeks ago. I said, listen, the closer we get to the election, the more that Trump starts to win, the more deranged these people will get, right? And lo and behold, less than 2 weeks out, now the conversation is not about what Kamala's going to do. It's not about her economic policies. It's not about the border. It's not about the issues. It's about Trump being Hitler, a Nazi, and a fascist, okay? This is what they're doing at this point, okay? This is a daily conversation that, for whatever reason, they think is a good idea to have going into the election, right? They really think that this is what's going to help Kamala Harris win, even though they've been doing this for 8 years straight and it hasn't worked, right? But they believe it's going to work this time, right? It's going to work this time, okay? This is what they believe. So, I want to go ahead and react to a panel discussion on CNN that is going to erupt after Kevin O'Leary drops a couple of truth bombs on the panel about, one, how this strategy of Trump is Hitler is not going to work. And the CNN panel, including the so-called neutral journalist, Abby Phillip, isn't really going to like Kevin O'Leary telling the truth too much. So without further ado, roll the clip.
Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant. He does not understand this country, its history, or what it means to be deeply American. And that's why November 5th, I'm casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
We do not need 4 years of a wannabe king, a wannabe dictator running around trying to punish his enemies. That's not what you need in your life. America's ready to turn the page.
This is not 2016 and it is not 2020. Including because just a few months ago, the United States Supreme Court told the former president that he is effectively immune no matter what he does in the White House. Now just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
You know what? There's no science around how do you close, that's the thing, And so to me, the biggest argument against Trump is the whole January 6th argument. I really believe that. If you take politics out of it, get out of your bubble, whatever.
Enough for people like Larry. Yeah. We have one of his generals coming out saying that he talked about Hitler admiringly. All of these things. Kamala Harris last night on CNN said Donald Trump is a fascist.
Yes, and there is a reason for that. And there actually is science around this closing because data shows, the campaign's data that all of the Democratic groups are focusing on focus groups, all of the things that they're hearing at the doors. I have heard this as well. The January 6th issue is absolutely incredibly compelling, and it moves voters.
It's old news. The Jan 6 deal has been in the market forever. This rhetoric from people saying Trump is a Nazi and a fascist in the market forever. Do you really want to spend your closing statements on old stuff that's already needled into 45% of the country that hates him?
Is it old news,
It's
or
not,
is,
though.
or is
Right.
he also now running to? I mean, the problem. It would be old news if he was not running to be president.
Except
again.
think about
I
what
would
you're trying
say
to think what you're
supporting
trying to
Nazis-
replace. You're trying
supporting
to tell
Nazis is
somebody
always relevant.
you don't you
Always
should
relevant.
care
Makes
more
news.
about
Yeah.
Nazi Trump than the cost of gasoline, your rent, and the protein you buy for your
That
family.
is literally the argument. Okay,
And I think
yes.
that's a losing
Kevin,
argument.
The argument is you should care more about whether the president of the United States is a fascist and admires Nazis than you should about the cost
really
of gasoline
believes
today.
that?
You don't think that's
No,
a fair
no,
argument?
see,
A lot of Americans
I think
believe
the
that.
I don't
argument
think
is-
so. I
Yes,
really
they
don't.
do.
I think the argument is you should care if he's a Nazi.
Yeah.
Yes. You should care if he's pro all sorts of other authoritarians like Viktor Orban and
Right.
Putin and various others. That's all relevant. But even if you don't care about those things, even if you're more interested in pocketbook issues, he's still not going to be good for your pocketbook.
If I could chime in, a lot of this stuff, hell, I've been discussing this for over a year now on this network. The needle hasn't necessarily moved against a former president. I'm just speaking as a strategist here. There's a reason this race is tied neck and neck. Now, perhaps some people may dismiss it. Perhaps there are other priorities that people are more concerned about. But clearly, that message alone isn't resonating with enough voters to give Vice President Harris a comfortable lead in this race to be able to say, I have this in the bag.
But
she
see-
doesn't for a reason.
But see, it's not that message alone. This isn't the only thing that she's talking about. One of the things that I thought was so brilliant
tell
last
us what
night
she
at
is
the
talking
town
about,
hall,
'cause-
I will tell you what
'cause
she's
I
talking
don't know.
about.
I listen, I couldn't understand
Well, then
anything.
you're not listening very well.
trying to.
Last night, what she talked about is that she has a to-do list for the American people, while Donald Trump has an enemies list.
what's
And
on the
those
list?
are
Wow. As I've told you guys before, and I'll tell you again, it really blows my mind that some of these individuals are getting paid millions of dollars to just be wrong, right? Just to be wrong, okay? Because Kevin O'Leary is 100% right. The January 6th stuff is already baked in. The voters that are going to be moved by January 6th in the Trump is Hitler, Trump is a Nazi, he's a fascist rhetoric, those people are already voting Democrat. They're already voting Democrat. They've already been moved. So, again, this idea that somehow now all of a sudden this closing argument is going to sway people who are on the fence or who are undecided or who are persuadable, okay, I think it's just nonsense. And I'm at the point now where it's like, I'm not even mad about it. Like, I'm not upset about them saying it. I'm actually okay with that, because if that's the closing argument they're going to make, that's the closing argument that gives Trump the best chance of winning, right? If her focus is on Trump being a Nazi, Trump being a fascist, Trump being Hitler, I'm totally fine with that, because the Trump campaign is going to focus on the closing message being, hey, do you want to improve the economy? Do you want to close the border? Do you want to end these foreign wars? Do you want more jobs? Do you want more opportunities, right? These are the issues that the American people actually are focused on. These are the issues that the American people actually care about, okay? And if Trump focuses on that while she focuses on him being Hitler and all this other nonsense, that again, it's just not grounded in reality. None of these things happened during his first administration.
I can't. I think part of the reason why I'm being pushed towards Trump so strongly is that I find that the Democrats and the left just keep going straight to Hitler all of the time with everything. Like it, and if it's not the left pushing Hitler, it's the right pushing Stalin. So it's like we're fighting World War II every single day for every single election. So it's so exhausting. I think it just it pushes me away from their position, and it's so hyperbolic that it makes it impossible to have good discussions, and I think it ruins the discourse.
Does anybody think it's valuable or something you want to hear from the vice president? Anybody? Raise your hand if you think this is something that's important for her to be talking about. Anybody?
if she wants to focus on fear mongering instead of actually presenting a vision for what the country is going to look like under her leadership, great, right? Great. Do that, okay? Again, because that, in my opinion, is going to give Trump the best chance of winning, okay? And again, what's so funny about this is that you guys remember when Kamala Harris first got into the race and some of the Republicans and conservatives was talking about how she's not qualified, she's incompetent, she's a DEI hire, all this other stuff, right? It's crazy because at that point, these same people in the media were telling Republicans, well, this is why Kamala Harris is surging. You guys are focused on a whole bunch of things that the American people don't care about, right? You focus on name calling and talking about Kamala Harris's race and all this other stuff that has nothing to do with what the American people actually care about. You probably should focus on the actual issues if you want to win, right? This is what they were saying, okay? This is the advice they were giving. Lo and behold, now that Kamala Harris is losing, what happened to that advice that they were giving Republicans, which is that, hey, if you want to win, you might want to stick to the actual kitchen table issues, right? The issues that the American people care about. All of a sudden, they don't know how to follow their own advice, right? The same advice they were giving to Republicans. Amazing how that works. These people really believe that Trump being a fascist, Trump being Hitler is a real issue, right? It's not. Again, because in his first administration, none of the things these people are talking about happened at all. None of those things happened. The only thing they can point to is January 6th. And if you're going to vote based on January 6th, I would advise you to highly consider BLM, highly consider Roe v. Wade, Antifa, the pro-Palestine riots, because if that's what you're voting based off of one day of political violence, then I would suggest you look at all the political violence in this country that has been caused by Democrats, which, by the way, with the way this rhetoric is escalating, the chance of political violence happening if Trump wins the election is increasing due to the fact that these people are literally saying that Trump is going to kill women, that he is Hitler, that the country's over, that they're going to be thrown in the gulags. This is what they're saying. You don't think that rhetoric could potentially lead to some negative consequences if Trump wins the election, right? In regards to the reaction from the lunatics who are going to be brainwashed by this rhetoric that is being spewed on the airwaves of networks like MSNBC and CNN, right? I think that these people are leading us down a path that they will not take responsibility for when shit hits the fan after the election, right? If that happens, and I'm hoping that that doesn't happen. But the way that these people are escalating their rhetoric, I'm just saying, I think that there are negative consequences for that. And again, when it happens, they'll turn around and they'll point the finger at Trump. Well, this happened because Trump bad, and people are just upset with what he might do. Instead of pointing the finger at themselves and saying, wait, maybe we incited these people to be more upset than they should be about Trump winning because we made up a bunch of things about what Trump is going to do that he's not going to do, right? None of these things are going to happen, right? So I'm just saying, I think that this rhetoric here has serious consequences. And also on top of that, I don't think it's going to help them win. I want to play another clip here from Kevin O'Leary in which he upsets the CNN panel again by dropping another truth bomb, which is the fact that part of the reason why Democrats are in this situation is because of the fact that they overthrew democracy within their own party. Instead of letting the voters decide the best candidate, the elites decided the best candidate, and that is ultimately why they picked a weak candidate. Take a look.
I would like to introduce the concept to the panel tonight. It's going to be a short dissertation, but I want you to think about this because I watched like you did yesterday, and something hit me pretty hard. Only 90 days ago, Pelosi went to Biden and said, you need to step aside, and convinced him to do so. He made the decision, and he did actually ask her, and we've now learned this, is she the right person to drive this home? He questioned that. He could have said, we need to run a process in order for me to make this move. But they decided not to. I don't know who they is. Was it Obama? Was it Pelosi? I don't care who it was. In stock picking, just listen to this analogy. And you may agree, you may not. 88% of managers, because this is the world I live in, cannot beat the S&P year in, year out. So you give them $1,000, the S&P beats them. They can't pick stocks. This is the second time the Democratic Party has circumvented democracy and chose.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
That's
Hillary
not
Clinton.
true.
Hillary Clinton
No.
was
There's
chosen,
nothing- hang
and
on.
she had Bruce Springsteen too.
Hold on,
and what
hold on.
happened to her?
Hil-
And now we've chosen.
Kevin, Hillary Clinton won a primary. Okay, she won a primary. You may not.
Nobody
like the-
could
that
compete
how
with
the
her, even
primary-
Bernie Sanders.
She won a primary.
Okay.
First of all, that's the first
So
thing.
did Kamala
The second thing,
Harris
we've
win a
talked-
primary?
Listen, we've talked about this before.
What's wrong
How
about talking about
hard-
it tonight after what you just saw?
Do you think that's really
I'm
what
talking
matters
to you
to
now,
voters?
right now.
Your
How
whole shtick is-
many Democrats wish?
Your whole shtick has
Hang
been,
on a second.
Let's talk about what matters to voters. Do you really think voters care about the internecine primary
If,
process?
if
of
you're
the
a
Democratic
Democrat,
Party?
you sure as hell care today.
I know that you are from Canada, but the primary process.
That's why I'm
the primary
perfect for this.
process in this
I have no
country
skin in the game
is
other
not
than
in
to
the
get a great
Constitution.
president.
It's not in the Constitution. The political parties can choose however they want to choose their nominee.
Right.
And as long as they meet the legal deadlines in the states where they are on the ballot, they can do it however they want.
but I just
they can
want to
decide
be
December
transparent.
2023.
Yes, I was born in
They can
Canada,
decide in
but
December 2023 to just handpick somebody.
just to
They don't
be
even have to have a
transparent,
primary.
I was born in
It's just
Canada.
not a
It's a
thing.
Democratic Party
It's not a
process,
thing.
not a Democratic
No,
process.
but my kids were born and raised in Boston. All my investments in the United States. I want the president, whoever it is, to be a
You're
winner.
describing something as undemocratic that has absolutely nothing to do with the democratic
And this
process.
is why
Was she anointed or not?
But I do want to.
Wow. Every liberal on this panel is a low IQ individual, right? Especially Abby Phillip, the moderator, the so-called journalist, because again, she's so obsessed with defending Democrats that is at the point where she just sounds dumb. She doesn't even understand the argument that Kevin O'Leary was making. Kevin O'Leary wasn't making an argument about whether or not voters care about Democrats overthrowing democracy within their own party, which, I think that some people actually do care. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough people that care considering the overt hypocrisy behind it. But that actually wasn't the point. His point was that the democratic process is there for a reason. And the fact is that Democrats do overthrow the democratic process within their own party. They did it with Hillary. Okay. And we know this for a fact because Donna Brazile, when she was working at the DNC, admitted out loud, and Elizabeth Warren admitted as well, too, that they finagled their own primaries. Okay, they allegedly did it in 2020, and they did it in 2024 as well, too, right? So the point is not whether or not that's legal or whether that's constitutional. That's not the point, which is what Abby Phillip doesn't understand because she's so focused on trying to, again, defend Democrats rather than to actually listen to the point that Kevin O'Leary is making, which is that the Democrats abandoning the democratic process is the reason why they have a weak candidate, right? When you have the elites pick the candidate instead of having the people pick the candidate, that is what results in getting weak candidates like a Hillary Clinton or a Kamala Harris, okay? Or Joe Biden in 2024, okay? Because, again, Democrats circumvented the democratic process in their own primary, in which they didn't really allow a real primary to happen, okay? They finagled it heavily in Joe Biden's favor, and that ultimately resulted in the Democrats having a candidate that was mentally declining to the point where he had to drop out of the race because he mentally deteriorated for the world to see on a CNN debate stage, right? To the point where the media couldn't spin it anymore, okay? And then they turn around and they picked another candidate instead of letting voters decide, and look what's happening right now. She is collapsing just like Joe Biden was collapsing. And the reason why he compared that to stock pickers is because this is talked about quite a bit and debated quite a bit in financial circles, which is whether or not stock pickers and fund managers who use active management, can they pick stocks and get better returns versus the market, right? Versus the S&P 500. And it turns out that the elite, they have a hard time beating the market, that they can't get better returns than the market a vast majority of the time, right? So when the elites are picking winners and losers, it turns out that that's not better than a more democratized approach, right? That is the point that Kevin O'Leary was trying to make. But the low IQ CNN panel clearly didn't understand that, okay? Including the lady that's supposed to be an expert in economics, right? But she has a degree in anthropology, okay? Not sure how she's an expert in economics when, again, she hasn't ever really studied economics outside of reading a few liberal papers, but that's neither here nor there. I guess CNN, their standards are so low now that they consider anybody to be an expert in economics if you just say that you read a few liberal studies. So maybe that's it. But the point is this, right, that Kevin O'Leary was trying to make. And I think they kind of know the point he was trying to make. They just don't like the fact that it's true. that the ultimate downfall of the Democrats, if Kamala Harris loses, is going to be because the Democrats have a habit of circumventing democracy, right? They hate democracy. They don't like letting voters decide anything, right, at all, okay? Which is funny because, again, they claim to be the party of democracy and that they love democracy, except no, they actually hate democracy. And because of their hate for democracy, that's ultimately going to be their downfall, okay? Because if they had let the voters decide in the primary, okay, if they had a real primary, and when Joe Biden dropped out, if they had another primary, if they let the voters decide, they probably would have got a better candidate. But because of their disdain for democracy and their attempts to subvert democracy within their own party, this is what it's led to. And again, this is probably going to be one of the primary reasons why Kamala Harris loses. And that is the real point there that Kevin O'Leary was making. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.